Good evening, everyone. Good evening, everyone. Tonight's July 28th, 2022 Special Rent Control Board meeting is now called to order. Mr. Secretary, may we please have the roll?
Yes, Commissioner Torosis.
Here.
Commissioner Leslie.
Here.
Vice Chair Foster.
Here.
Chair Duran.
I am here. Okay, thank you very much. Moving right to administrative items. Before I get started, I do want to make a notice that if anyone wishing to address the board on the specific item for tonight's agenda, you should have contacted the board secretary prior to the meeting. If you would like to make a public comment, feel free to request to do so in the chat function in Blue Jeans, or you may dial area code 408-740-7256 using meeting ID number 630-472-746 with the passcode of 7348. Okay, moving on to item number 12, administrative items. Consideration of a proposed ballot measure to amend the rent control law to change the formula for calculating the general adjustment to eliminate rent increases for 4 years for units with MARs at or below the median MIR by unit size. Discussion and possible recommendation a proposed ballot measure to address the impact of the 2022 general adjustment. May we have a staff report, please?
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, Commissioners. There's one item on your agenda this evening. You are going to be discussing two proposals for amending the rent control charter to address the 2022 general adjustment and the cap on the annual general adjustments. I thought it might be easiest to share my screen with you if I can do that successfully. Let me see if I can bring this up for you. Can everyone see what I'm sharing now?
Yes.
Yeah, yes.
Okay, so as the board will recall, at its meeting on July 14th, it considered this proposal that I'm sharing now. And this proposal had two parts to it. So the first part, as you see from paragraph 3 here, this is the part of the charter that sets the upper and lower limits for any increase within any given year. So those limits are currently a 6% upper limit and a 0% lower limit. So the first part of this proposal would change that 6% cap to 3% going forward. The second part of this proposal addresses the June 2022 announcement of the GA. As the board is aware, because of the hyperinflation, the 6% cap was reached for the 2022 GA for the very first time. So in an effort to blunt the impact of that rent increase, the board, the council, and the board adopted this language that you see here. The proposal was starting on January 1st, 2023, the 2022 GA would be reduced to 3% through August 31st, and then subsequent GAs would be built on that 3% increase as opposed to the 6%. So tenants would be paying a 6% increase from September through December, and then starting in January, they would go down to 3%. At the July 26th council meeting, this proposal was adjusted slightly to what you see here. Now you'll notice that the paragraph 3 was not changed. So the 6% cap would still be reduced to 3% for future increases. But the 2022 GA was going to be addressed in a slightly different way. And as you can see here, the proposal was to have, starting in March of 2023, the 6% GA would drop to 0. So for 6 months, there would be 0 GA, and for 6 months, there would be a 6% GA for a net general adjustment of 3%, with a maximum dollar amount limit of $70. So that was this proposal. Also at the July 26th meeting, for the very first time, was a new proposal from Councilmember Negretti, which would fundamentally change the formula for GAs going forward. It would keep the methodology in place for all units with MARs above the median, and then for all units with MARs below the median, according to, I guess, 2021 annual report, they would see 0 increases for 4 years. In the staff report, there is a detailed legal analysis. I won't go through that all with you. I'm assuming that you've all read it. But it shows that there are fundamental legal problems with this proposal. And in addition to those legal problems, there are also significant public policy concerns about this proposal, because there is no evidence that tenants who are paying below the median MAR are all low income across the board. And by the same token, there's no evidence that tenants who are paying rent above the median MAR are all high income. And in fact, just the opposite has been shown to be true, which is why we have an affordability crisis in the first place. Tenants who are forced to pay ever-increasing rents are paying more and more of their income on rent. And so the proposal that the board approved and that the city council proposed addresses, by lowering the 2022 GA and by lowering the cap for future rent, it addresses those ever-increasing rents that newer tenants are having to absorb. And so with that, I will stop sharing my screen, and I will, and I did want to point out one other thing. This proposal will pit lower paying tenants against higher paying tenants, and it will also punish those landlords who have been protecting longer term tenants and who have been adhering and honoring the rent control law for many, many years. And it would also incentivize tenant harassment, and it could also drive landlords out of the business completely. So this would have the exact opposite effect of its stated intention. And so with that, I will take any questions if I can figure out how to stop sharing my screen.
I have a question, Steve. Oh.
Okay. I have Commissioner Terosis. I have a question. We do have people in queue, the general public, to speak. So if there's any questions relating to the staff report, now would be the time, my fellow commissioners, to ask. So I have Commissioner Terosis, and then I have Vice Chair Foster, and then I will question last. So go ahead, Commissioner Terosis.
Okay, hopefully everyone can hear me, and apologies if it's not clear. I'm driving from a work event, but thank you, Council. I wanted to know just the averaging of the 6% and the 0%, because I've been getting some questions about this, and I want to make a point of clarification. Although we would reduce the GA from 6% to 0%, I do want to make it clear that that average would be a 3% average increase for the year 2022-23, and then building upon that 3% increase, we would allow another 3% increase in 23-24. We would not be starting from a 0% increase. Clarify that for us?
Yes, and the language does make that clear. The final sentence of that proposal says that the GA would be considered a 3% for 2022 increase, and that is what the future MARs would be built upon.
Great, thank you. And then my second question is, you mentioned, and I did read the staff report, your advice that there are serious legal concerns with the alternative proposal. Just for the benefit of the public, can you just detail, is that a business decision, or are you advising the board that it would potentially open us up to significant litigation if we were to adopt the alternative proposal?
Well, yes, that's right. And not only that, but I think there would be those challenges would be meritorious, because this does not take into account the constitutional requirement to provide a fair and reasonable return to property owners. And as there are many cases on this subject that show that you cannot just drop the rent increases to zero and have no annual increases for certain categories of landlords, because that would essentially deprive them of their right to a fair return and force them into a hearing process just to get what they're already entitled to. And so that opens us up to it being struck down altogether, opens us up to claims of confiscatory delays, as well as potential equal protection challenges. And so it's unlikely to pass constitutional muster.
Thank you. I don't have any other questions on the staff report.
Okay, thank you. Vice Chair Foster, any questions regarding the staff report?
Yes. Ms. Regan, thank you for your analysis. Can you talk a little bit more about the equal treatment of tenants and drawing this line in the sand and splitting them in half and applying different rates to different people on this bizarre basis? How do you see that under the law?
Well, I see that more as it would be a widening of the already significant gap between what the rent that longer-term tenants are paying and what newer tenants are having to pay. And so the result of that necessarily would be to further incentivize harassment against those tenants, to drive them out. It would just further incentivize what we're already dealing with, because there's such a greater reward for having a newer tenant as opposed to protecting current tenants. And so we don't want to add any additional incentives to that already challenging issue, thanks to Costa-Hawkins.
Thank you.
Okay, before I go, Commissioner Leslie, did you happen to have any questions to staff regarding the staff report?
I just wanted to listen a little further to make sure that I fully understood it.
Sure.
So I wanted to make sure I was perfectly clear. If she could explain it a little bit further for me, as far as like I was too. I just want to make sure I'm perfectly clear, because I know there's a lot of people that are kind of confused as far as how this works and what, as far as from 0%, what was proposed at City Council comparison to what we have proposed, and why it is, why it's a violation of what we've fought so hard for.
Okay, I wasn't sure if you had raised your hand or not, so I was just making sure. Ms. Regan, do you have a response to her question at this time, or?
No, I mean, if there's something that Commissioner Leslie, you want me to clarify, I'd be happy to do that. I'm not sure if you had a specific question or if you wanted to hear from other folks.
I don't see her. Go ahead.
You're mute, Erica. You're muted. You're muted.
I'm still muted.
We can't hear you very well.
Right. I don't know.
Hear her now. We can hear you now.
Okay, I'm just trying to
Yeah.
make sure I'm heard. Okay, so what I was asked by a few community members is what is the difference between what we're proposing comparison to what Councilman Negretti or Councilmember Villatore proposed for clarification.
Sure. So in a nutshell, what the board has recommended is in two parts. So the first part would be to lower the existing 6% cap on rent increases generally, to lower that to 3%. And so that would impact future annual general adjustment. And then the second part of the proposal is to try to do something about the 2022 general adjustment, which is already at 6%. And so because that goes into effect in September and this election isn't until November, that 6% is going to be in effect from September through December. And so we're trying, I think the board and the council were trying to find a solution to be able to have a net increase of 3% for 2022. And so the solution that was proposed and the sort of, I'll go with the modified solution that is now on the table, is to say, okay, if we want to get to a net 3% 2022 increase, then it'll be 6% from September through the end of February. That's 6 months. And then for the next 6 months, it's going to be 0. So that overall, the average will be a 3% increase for 2022. So those are essentially the two parts of the board's proposal. And Councilmember Negretti's proposal is very different. It doesn't address the 2022 rent increase, and it doesn't touch the cap, and it basically says there are only a certain category of units that she's talking about. These are units below the median MAR, and for all of those units, only those tenants paying rents below the median MAR will have a 0 increase for 4 years. So those are the two different proposals.
I have a question. I know sorry. Go ahead, Erica.
So for further clarity, in between September and January, is there any remedy or help for those extremely low income tenants that will be unable to do the 6% increase between now and the election?
So my understanding is that for those tenants, the council is trying to expand the POD program and other rental assistance programs.
Yeah, they've earmarked ARPA money and other federal funds and state funds. They've cobbled together a couple, like upwards of $2 million from a couple different buckets of money that would be distributed based on need, is what I heard.
Okay.
I think Tracy has some information on that.
Yeah, could I just add to that? So already the city staff is starting to collect names and contact information of people who may have already received rent increase notices and know that that 6% increase will be challenging for them to pay. So if there is anybody in that situation, they could call the rent control agency or email us and provide information, their name, their address, contact information for them, and then as soon as the program is rolled out, the city will be directly contacting those people, as well as publicizing the program once it is put into place.
We also
There was also talk of an eviction moratorium as a possible part of this.
well, the county already has the eviction moratorium in place, so tenants can already utilize that moratorium by just signing a declaration that they're impacted by COVID.
Okay. Commissioner Leslie, did you have any more questions? Okay. I do have a question, Ms. Regan. You had mentioned in your opening statement that the effect of the proposed change from Councilmember Negretti, the effect of the small landlords, I didn't quite get all of it, but my understanding was that those that had been providing long-term rent control to tenants here would be affected negatively by the proposed change that Ms. Negretti, Councilmember Negretti put forth. Can you expand on that a bit? I want to get all the details on that.
Sure. So what we know from the annual report is that most of the units, most of the property owners own units of between 4 and 16, and that those smaller properties are where many of our long-term, low rent paying tenants are. And as we know, the smaller properties are typically owned by the so-called mom and pops, the property owners that have 1 or 2 properties that are their investment properties. And so it's these property owners that have these smaller properties with the longer term tenants who are going to be impacted the most, because this proposal denies them a rent increase for 4 years. And there is just, from a constitutional standpoint, there's just no basis for that. It's not rationally related to income because there's no evidence that those tenants are lower income. But just from a practical standpoint, those are the property owners, those are the landlords that have been abiding by the rent control law, that have had the longer term tenants, that have not forced them out, that have not utilized the Ellis process. And yet this proposal would punish those landlords for no reason.
Okay, that answers my question for now. Thank you. I'd like to.
Can I actually ask a follow-up question on that, Steve? Sorry.
Sure, go ahead, Commissioner Trosses.
I also want to draw a distinction, Ms. Regan, on who stands to make more money under this proposal. I would say that all things considered, we haven't had time to do a financial analysis, but say that the larger landlords, the NMSs, the potential amount of money that could be collected under this proposal, all things considered, at a 6% rate versus a 3% rate across the board, would actually further enrich landlords more than a 3% across the board proposal?
That's absolutely true. I mean, the ones who have been the most aggressive in kicking out longer term tenants and in setting the units at market rates would benefit the most from this proposal.
Thank you. That's it.
Okay.
One more follow-up question for staff.
Go ahead, Vice Chair Foster.
Thank you. Allison or Tracy, can you talk a little bit about why rent control, as opposed to some other forms of housing programs, is not means tested? In other words, we don't check every single resident of every single unit's income, assets, cash accounts. Why don't we do that?
I think, Commissioner Vice Chair Foster, you said it most eloquently, I think, at our last meeting. The goals of a rent stabilization or a rent control program are different from an affordable housing project. This is to stabilize communities, as you said very aptly last meeting. This is to ensure predictability as well as to build a diverse community. We don't means test tenants in the same way we don't means test landlords. You know, are we going to put limits on the income that landlords can receive before they can get an increase? That would not be a workable program, and that is not what the law requires. The whole idea is to stabilize rents across the board for everyone so that there's predictability for both owners and tenants. It's a balance between affordability and a fair return. And that's very different from the goals of income-based programs.
Yep. And last, to follow up on that, we have published MARs. It's very published GAs, published general adjustments for the last 43 years. The last 23 since vacancy decontrol. Is it not correct that the average GA at every apartment price point, both long-termers, more expensive market rate units, has in fact been 1.9% on average, and that has satisfied the fair return doctrine in spades for many, and has been adequate as far as the courts are concerned for 23 years.
Well, I'll take your word for that figure, but I will tell you that it's the formula. Those figures are a result of the formula that we have had in place, and it's that formula that has been tested in court and has passed constitutional muster for all this time.
That's right. Thank you so much.
Okay, moving on to our public request, public speakers.
Chair Duran.
Yes.
Excuse me, Chair. Before we go to the public speakers, may I just say something?
Of course, go ahead.
Okay, I just wanted to go back to the question about possible resources available for people for whom the increase will be financially unsustainable. Along with the city's Community Services Department, the Rent Control Agency issued a survey at the beginning of this month, or the end of last month, and asked people to fill out a survey about their housing needs. The city staff is evaluating the results of that survey, and they do have some ARPA funds that are available to be used for this purpose, but they are in the process of doing that analysis and determining how it will be put together in terms of addressing need. So it's not yet defined, but as I mentioned, we would encourage people to contact us or to contact the city's 311 line and let us know if they would like to hear more about that program once it is defined.
I have a question for you, Tracy, regarding that. Steve, if I may.
Sure, go right ahead.
Can you, so if council were to place on the ballot by at least 4 votes of their council the recommendation that we and other organizations have made, which is 6% down to 3%, that would continue to follow the acceptable formula. It would have a different ceiling that we estimate would hold up because of returns in the last several years. Can you imagine a world, though, if the alternate scenario presented by council members Negrete and De La Torre, if that were to be the only thing on the ballot and it were to pass, and it were then to be overturned in court after several months, can you see a world in which everybody's rent goes up to 6% across the city, and potentially people even have to pay back rent when they paid 0?
Well, I think the language in the ballot measure would likely say if the measure that passed was found to be unconstitutional, it would revert to the law that was in effect before that. So it would remain the way the law currently is. The cap would remain at 6%, and this year the maximum increase would be $140.
So what you're saying is if the alternative measure goes forward and the voters put it in, but it's no good, everyone in the city will get 6%.
No, I think it would.
With the $140 cap, you said it would go back.
To what the current charter says. So
Right.
It would be a floor of 0, a ceiling of 6%.
So I think I can.
Right.
So this proposal doesn't say anything about the 2022 general increase. So this would go into effect after this year. So tenants would still have to pay 6% throughout the entirety of 2022.
Oh, that was not made clear at council.
Well, there's nothing about implementation, and so laws are prospective unless it's said otherwise. So the way
all citizens of Santa Monica would pay 6% with the 140 cap for a full year, and so the city would have to come up with emergency funds twice as long, and then would still have to come up with emergency funds if there are any left for people who are terribly rent burdened at points that are above the median mark, because they will be getting 6% on an ongoing basis under the alternative. We're supposed to be considering these two proposals, so I'm trying to make sure I understand the ramifications of this second proposal, since it has been brought with such notice and no study. So thank you. I think you've helped us understand that proposal. I think how you're answering my question is that there's a lot of risk involved with the alternative proposal, a lot of uncertainty, and a full year at 6% for everybody. Thank you for answering my questions.
Okay, I'd like to move now to the list of public speakers. The first I have on the list is Bill Davids, and followed will be Phyllis Dudek. So, Secretary Ho, if you could help with Mr. Davids.
Yes, Mr. Davids, you will have 3 minutes to address the board. You have been unmuted. Please go ahead.
Thank you. I wanted to raise something, and perhaps I'm just missing it in the course of discussion, but originally we were talking about emergency empowerment, presumably of the rent control commissioners, to be able to adjust rents in not just in the current crisis that we're going through, but in the future. And I know that originally there was a discussion about emergency empowerment in terms of a health emergency, but we are also now facing, obviously, an economic emergency, first inflation, and quite possibly next year we will go into a recession. I'm not sure how deep. I'm not an economist. But there seems to, I'm not sure if it's being ignored or if it's being overlooked or if it's not being addressed at all. But there should be some consideration of emergency empowerment under a variety of circumstances, so we don't have to go through this on an annual basis. Also, insofar as the small mom and pop owners are concerned, one of the things that I think should be done on their behalf, we already have the Mills Act, which provides tax incentives for landmarked properties in the film and TV industry, which I'm more familiar with. We obviously have tax incentives to keep film and TV production here. There should also be tax incentives for the small mom and pop operators insofar as keeping and preserving our rent-controlled properties. And I would hope that the mom and pop owners of properties would consider going to our state lawmakers to see if it's feasible to have a tax incentive to preserve and keep our rent-controlled properties without the threat of Ellising properties over our heads. Also, insofar as Councilmember Negretti's proposal, first of all, it was not an agenda item. I'm not sure where that came up in the middle of the night, but my concern is that it is a presumptive metric insofar as essentially guiding rent control policy based upon the personal economics of renters. I just think it should be discarded. It should not be considered at all. And insofar as help for renters, because the 6% is front-loaded for the first 6 months, just like the...
I'm sorry, Mr. Davids, that's your time.
If he could finish his thought, if you could sum up, Mr. Davids, and that's okay with everybody else, I'd like to hear it.
Mr. Davids, you have been unmuted. Please continue.
Thank you. My final thought really is that just like the state of California will be sending out inflation checks to appropriate people later this year, perhaps there should just be a general consideration for inflation checks coming out of the allocations that are becoming available to the city of Santa Monica to our rent-controlled renters. So that's basically a summing up, and I appreciate being heard.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. Appreciate your comments.
Steve, sorry to interrupt. Steve, I'm getting communications from the public that they need to see. There's some audio issues. People need to see the call-in number, and they're asking and requesting to see it like on a share screen. Maybe if the agenda could be put up, share screen for a few moments.
Sure.
People are not, like they said, the number was rattled off once too quickly, and they weren't ready to write it down. They can't see it.
Gotcha. Okay. Understood. Before we go on, Secretary Ho, would you be able to do that? Could you post that up on the screen very quickly?
Yes, I believe I can do that. Just a moment.
Okay, so I see it on my screen. You can dial one of those three numbers. I'll just recite the first one. 408 is the area code. 740-7256. The meeting ID number is 630-472-746. That's 630-472-746. And the participant passcode is 7348, followed by a number sign to confirm. Again, 7348, and then the number sign. I guess we can leave that up for a minute, and then we can go to our next speaker, who is Phyllis Dudick, followed by Sonia Sultan.
Yes, Ms. Dudick, you will have 3 minutes to address the board. You have been unmuted.
Okay, 3 minutes?
Please go ahead. Yes, 3
okay.
minutes.
Okay, thank you. First, I would like to thank our counsel, Allison Reagan, and staff for doing a valiant job in just over 24 hours or so to analyze and vet this unvetted alternative amendment brought up at the 11th hour without transparency, nor was it agendized on July 26th. Upon analysis, we do see that this amendment does not meet the spirit, the intention of rent control, nor rent control law. But I do have a couple of questions I was curious about. Plus, I do think it's a discrimination, rent discrimination, toward some who are paying more than others, which is not the spirit of rent control. But anyway, I have a question. So rent is frozen for 4 years for some. Obviously, we're going to have more petitions for increased rent received from landlords. So I hope people understand when these petitions are received, it's not as in my understanding, it's not the city that pays the landlords. This goes right back to the tenants. Tenants have to pay, as far as I know. Okay, but okay, so for 4 years at 0, and the cap is still 6%. Each year we're getting some kind of a, some kind of a MAR or whatever. Would that be added to this 0, people who are paying 0, and then suddenly in 4 years they've got 16% they're going to pay, 24, 10, whatever it is? I was just curious about that, how that worked. And also, I'm wondering about, I have another question, and that is that, there may be some rent-burdened people who are not in low income, for this, getting back to the 6% for 6 months and then 0 for 6 months. There may be some rent-burdened people who are not in low income. Would any of our programs, $750,000 and the $2.2 million coming in from other funds, I wonder if any of those, upon proof, could help any of those people who might be rent burdened at 6% for 6 months, even though not low income. So that was my question, and also I just would like to sum up by saying that appreciate all the work everybody's been doing to be fair to all, landlords and renters.
I'm sorry, Ms. Dudek, that's your time.
Ms. Dudek, if you want to finish your last thought, go right ahead.
Ms. Dudek, you have been unmuted. Please
We've
continue.
only had at least the fact that we've had only approximately 3 petitions for rent increases in 10 years shows that the rent control laws and the rent control, our rent control has seemed to be working pretty well. May I just add that it's so important that we have the emergency powers for our rent control board in declared emergencies. Otherwise, we're going to really find ourselves in a mess if something like this ever happens again. Thank you so much for all your efforts, and that's all I have to say right now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Dudek. And though we can't answer your questions at this time, I'd like to direct you to our staff who would be able to help you with getting answers to those questions. I would like to now call up Sonia Sultan, followed by David Watley. If you could help with Ms. Sultan.
Yes, actually, I do not see Ms. Sultan in our queue. Ms. Sultan, if you have dialed in from a different number other than the one you provided earlier, please let me know. We do have David Watley available.
Okay, we'll hear Mr. Watley and then followed, assuming Ms. Sultan doesn't come back on, then Jay Johnson will follow Mr. Watley.
Mr. Watley, you will have 3 minutes to address the board. You have been unmuted. Please go ahead.
Hi, David Watley here. I have a quick question. Is there a translator that can translate into Spanish?
No, I don't believe we have one present currently.
Okay. So can I just say my comments and translate as I go, and then have that be taken into account with regard to my time?
That would be okay with me, fellow commissioners.
I'll just translate it kind of like sentence by sentence, because I just want to make sure that the Spanish speakers of the Santa Monica community are able to, participate in this meeting and hear what's going on.
Before you begin, let me just ask this of counsel. The only issue that I would foresee is that what he says in Spanish is something that's completely different than what he's saying in English, and I don't know him. I don't know that. I doubt that would happen, but
that's not a problem.
It's not a problem. Okay.
Just 3 minutes, however he would like. Yeah.
Okay. Very good. Then go ahead. Mr. Watley.
Okay. Okay. And I'm going to do my best. I mean, word for word, I can try my best, but, it doesn't always work out exactly that way when you translate from language to language. Good evening. Yes, thank you. Good evening, Santa Monica Rent Control Board. My name is David Watley. Muy buenas tardes. La Rent Control Board de Santa Monica. Mi nombre es David Watley. I am a teacher, a musician, and I advocate with regard to issues pertaining to veterans, education, and human rights. Soy maestro, soy músico, y yo hago defensa en asuntos que tienen que ver con veteranos, la educación y derechos humanos. I'm here this evening to speak about the staff recommendations. Strike that. I'm here to speak on the recommendations pertaining to rent control. Yo estoy aquí para platicar en cuanto el asunto a las recomendaciones de rent control. I feel that not enough outreach has been done to the Latino community. Yo siento que no había suficiente contacto con la comunidad latino en Santa Monica. And
I'm sorry, Mr. Watley, that's your 3 minutes.
Okay, so because he's doing the translating, I believe we should allow more time. But before we go on, I want to make sure, Mr. Watley, that you're speaking on the item which is before us this evening. Just so long as your comments are limited to that, because that is what we're here to discuss, I'd appreciate it. And then unless others, if others will allow, I'll allow him to continue so he can get through his presentation. Go right ahead, Mr. Watley.
Mr. Watley, you've been unmuted. Please continue.
Thank you, Secretary Ho. Gracias, Secretaria Ho. So, yes, I am speaking on the matter before you. And sí, estoy platicando sobre el asunto que ustedes están revisando ahorita en este momento. I think that making a change to the charter is a big thing. Yo pienso que haciendo un cambio que tiene que ver con el charter de la ciudad de Santa Mónica es una cosa muy grande. And I think that more outreach needs to be done to the Latino community. Yo pienso que tienes que platicar más con la comunidad latina, or Latinx, if you prefer that. Yo hablé con el staff de Rent Control Board hoy. Oh, now I'm going reverse. I spoke with the Rent Control Board staff today. Maybe I'll continue doing that. Y me dijeron que solamente tuvieron 2 reuniones sobre este asunto. And they told me that I was told that there's only been 2 meetings with regard to this issue, public meetings. Reuniones públicas. Yo creo que es muy importante que incluimos la voz de todo la comunidad de Santa Mónica. I think it's important to include all voices within the city of Santa Monica. Y las recomendaciones que han hecho ahorita el staff, and the recommendations that have been made by the staff no han hablado con la comunidad latino. They have not spoken to the Latino community. No han hablado con las asociaciones civiles de cada neighborhood association. They have not spoken to our civil organizations, for example, our neighborhood associations. No han hablado con según yo, no han hablado con la Comisión para Personas con Discapacidades. From my understanding, staff has also not outreached to the Disabilities Commission. Entonces, yo creo, therefore, I think que no es justo recomendar, no es justo que votan en favor de las recomendaciones. I don't think it's just to vote in favor of the recommendations, ni de el staff, ni de la señora Negrete, of either the staff or Councilwoman Negrete.
Okay.
And then my last thing is I just have a public records request. Could I please get a public records request of how much outreach has been done with regard to this charter amendment, including how many people came and participated and the groups that were outreached to? Okay.
Understood, yes. And what I would like to do is direct you to our staff, and they can reach out to you, or you can reach them, and they can provide that information for you. Okay, Mr. Wiley? Thank you very much for your comments. I'd like to ask, is Ms. Sultan on, Secretary Ho?
I have not confirmed that Ms. Sultan is on. I did reach out to a member in our attendee queue. If you received that message and you are Ms. Sultan, please confirm by responding or dialing in.
Okay. So then I'll assume that she'll reach out to you if she would like to speak on this subject. We'll move on then to Jay Johnson, and then following Jay Johnson will be Kurt Gonska. Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Secretary
Mr.
Ho will
Johnson,
help you out.
Mr. Johnson, you will have 3 minutes to address the board. You have been unmuted. Please go ahead.
Good evening, Commissioners. This is Jay Johnson speaking, a member of the Progressive Landlords of Santa Monica. I'd like to speak directly to the ballot measure proposal that's on the agenda tonight. Whatever ballot item winds up being decided upon by either the rent board as well as council, there's 3 points I think that are critical to be included. Number one, that there be a sunset clause, that of a 2-year period on the sunset clause to whatever ballot initiative is accepted, with the proviso that the city council could extend that sunset clause if the CPI were to become 8% or more. Number two, that any average rent statistics and calculations that are used refer to the citywide numbers on page 17, figure 13 of the annual report of the Rent Control Board. This is the chart that details out the average rents by neighborhood and combines them into citywide numbers, but that is the chart that should be used because it's the most realistic and the most comparative. Number three would be that the CPI in the ballot measure state that the CPI shall be 100% of the CPI in the future, as the rent board, if the cap is 3%. If the ballot measure includes a cap of 3%, that then the CPI numbers that are used in the future would go to 100%. Lastly, that was for the points on the ballot initiative. Lastly, the rent increase petition, which was referred to earlier by an earlier speaker, is totally unworkable, needs dramatic reform. It has lengthy amortizations and processes. All the rehab and money that's gone into the buildings have gone to the vacant units, not for existing tenants. Nor have the money gone into many aspects of the exterior of the buildings. It needs a targeted process, and I'd like to encourage that strongly. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. We now have Kurt Gonska followed by Giacomo Valenti.
Yes, actually, Mr. Valenti has not joined our queue, but we do have Kurt Gonska ready.
Okay.
Mr. Gonska, you will have 3 minutes to address the board. You have been unmuted. Please go ahead.
Yes, thank you for the opportunity to speak to the board tonight. I appreciate it. I'd like to urge you to support the proposal approved by the board on July 14th and to strongly oppose the alternative proposal introduced by Councilmember Negrete. As stated in the charter, the purpose of establishing a rent control board empowered to regulate rentals in the city of Santa Monica is so that rents will not be increased unreasonably and so that landlords will receive no more than a fair return. Unfortunately, Councilmember Negrete's proposal does not prevent renters in controlled units above the median MAR from an unreasonable rent increase. Her proposal provides no increase on units that already have the lowest rents and dramatically increases rent for those already paying the most, unfairly impacting both renters in units above median MAR and landlords of units below median MAR. As we know, and I think has already been stated earlier in this meeting, there's no direct correlation between income and rent prices, but even to the extent that renters in units above the median MAR are better able to absorb a big increase, her proposal does not enable the board to protect renters from unreasonable increases. Essentially, her proposal pits the poor versus the middle class, when in reality, there's no reason that the board and the city cannot support both groups. In addition to urging you to support the proposal already approved by the board on July 14th, I'd also urge you to push back against the idea being pushed by some council members that inflation this year is an anomaly, just a one-time occurrence. And one idea to do that is to calculate what the annual inflation will be, even if it does drop to a more normal rate over the remaining months in the GA calculating period, in order to show that renters in units above median MAR stand to face another very substantial rent increase with the 2023 GA. So thank you very much for the time again tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Gonska. Secretary Ho, are there any other requests to speak from the public?
Yes, we do have several other requests to speak, and I've been told that Sonia Sultan is going to be joining us shortly.
Okay, so you'll let me know when she is available. Who do you have next on your list then?
Next, we have Denny Zane, followed by Patricia Hoffman.
Okay. Mr. Zane, good evening.
Mr. Zane, you'll have 3 minutes to address the board. You have been unmuted. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much. I appreciate very much the board's recognition that this is a matter of urgency and that you convened this special meeting to address the issues. We, I think at Santa Monica Surrenders Rights, certainly believe that there is an emergency here that needs to be addressed, that the 6% cap that is in the charter never anticipated the circumstances we are now in. And you need to be given the opportunity, the council needs to help to revise the charter to ensure that renters in this community have the kind of security that they deserve. Probably the 6% cap can't, from September to December 31st, probably cannot be altered. So you need to find a way to solve it going forward. I think it is important that the general adjustment should be uniform for all tenants. That is the only way in which to ensure long-term fairness and avoiding an ever-widening divide between the below median rents and the above median rents. For procedural reasons, some have suggested that any new change needs to start around March 1, which would make the 6% extended to that date. If that is the case, then I think your proposal that the general adjustment the cap be reduced to 0 for the remainder of the year, in effect going back to the prior year's MAR for every unit, and thereby providing an average of 3% makes a whole lot of sense. If those procedural questions, however, that that might require extending the 6% to about March 1, if those are surmountable, and you can actually stop the 6% at January 1, then I think the remainder of the year you would want to lower to like maybe 1.5% again in order to ensure an average of 3% over the year. I do think that it is very, very dubious policy to try to make a division in the universe of rental units at the median income. Certainly, the lion's share of the units above the median income are units that have been vacancy decontrolled at least once since vacancy decontrol was provided by state legislation. That means that there has been a means testing going on in the marketplace when the landlord sets the market rent after the vacancy and then, establishes for themselves confidence that the renter.
I'm sorry, Mr. Zane, that's your time.
He can finish his comment unless there's objection by others.
Yes, Mr. Zane, you have been unmuted. Please continue.
Okay. If that proposal was intended to, for example, provide some special benefit to mom and pop landlords, I think it really is misdirected. Those units are far more likely to be the corporate landlords, far more likely to be units that have been vacancy decontrolled by way of harassment, etc., and far less likely to be the mom and pop landlords. And so the benefit would be thereby skewed really contrary to the stated intent of the proposers. So please, uniformity among rent increase, 0% if the 6% extends to March 1, and maybe 1.5 if you can actually start it at January 1.
Thank you, Mr. Zane.
Thank you.
I have Patricia Hoffman next, and then I saw Mr. Valenti popped his head in there, so he can speak after Ms. Hoffman.
Yes, Ms. Hoffman, you will have 3 minutes to address the board. You have been unmuted. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Duran, Rent Control Board staff, and welcome to Ms. Leslie. After seeing hundreds of letters from rent-burdened people, I was happy to see you and the council come up with a method of fixing the problem of the 6%. Your solution works. The Negretti de la Torre method undermines the fairness of our entire rent control system, and it doesn't protect the most vulnerable. Santa Monica rent control works. The scheme brought forward by some council members could break it. Who does their landlord written plan benefit? It's not the tenants of Santa Monica, and it's not the future of rent control. Please reject their plan and put yours forward to the city council. Save Santa Monica rent control. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hoffman. I'd like to go back to Mr. Valenti, if he's still available.
Yes. So, yes, my name is Giacomo Valentini, and I'm a property manager here in Santa Monica. I manage several rent control buildings. I'm speaking for progressive landlords of Santa Monica. I'm skeptical about making permanent changes to the charter in response to a temporary emergency. Temporary problems deserve temporary solutions. In other words, using city funds to provide emergency help to tenants in need. As Ms. Regan pointed out, it's not rent control's job to needs test. The job of helping tenants in need is city funds like POD and so on. However, I have a proposal. If it is decided nonetheless to permanently change the cap on rent increases, then I would say we should reword the charter to completely remove the limit of 75% of CPI. 75% of CPI creates a double cap. Its rationale is that in years of high inflation, rent increases risk affecting tenants, so we should moderate them. But what's happened just now shows that 75% does nothing really to help people. There's a lot of people in real need. So we don't need the 75% if we are reducing the general cap. It would simplify the system. It's more effective to focus on one single cap. Such a change would offer landlords better protection against rising prices in normal years, in other words, years where inflation is 2-3%, and and also allow tenants to be protected by the overall cap. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Valentini. I'm sorry for mispronouncing your name. I did that earlier. Secretary Ho, do we have any other speakers?
Yes, we have Ms. Sultan that just joined us. We also have an unidentified speaker with a telephone number ending 0337.
Okay, Ms. Sultan, if you would like to go ahead and speak now, please do.
Ms. Sultan, you will have 3 minutes to address the board. You have been unmuted. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Good evening, Rent Control Board. This is obviously a very important juncture in the history of Santa Monica and of our longstanding rent control system that has been in place for well over 40 years and has provided stability to our community. And it's allowed us to create a community where people can put down roots and stay, raise families, and elderly people can remain in place as they age and participate in the civic life of our community. That's what's been so amazing about being a longtime resident of Santa Monica is all the community participation in every aspect of life here, including the political process. And that only comes from a stable community where people are secure in their homes and don't have to worry about being priced out or even made homeless with a unstable rent increase situation. So I very strongly support the staff proposal. I think some people have, Smur and Mr. Zane have made some excellent suggestions for possible modifications, but basically the staff recommendation would be is a very positive direction to help rent burden tenants in this time of extraordinary inflation and price increases. The alternative proposal, honestly, just doesn't make any sense, and it would completely upend the system that has helped Santa Monica maintain a stable community for more than 40 years. And there's really no rational basis for it that can be discerned. I mean, it's very random to just decide, well, everybody above a certain, the mean gets to pay, has to pay the 6% increase, and everybody below gets to pay nothing for 4 years, and then the whole thing goes back to the status quo, which really isn't satisfactory because it doesn't build in the long-term protection for tenants that lowering the GA would do. It just seems so random and so unconnected to what would be fair, because you have people who might be above that line who would be paying a 6% increase, and many of them are moderate income people. They're not rich necessarily. Maybe, some are. But most people are that came in after vacancy decontrol and are paying these higher rents are probably just as tightly stretched in their budgets as other people are. This isn't, most people have had a hard.
I'm sorry, Ms. Sultan, that's your time.
Without objection, if you could finish her thought, that would be good.
Ms. Sultan, you've been unmuted. Please continue.
Oh, thank you very much. Just to wrap up, that I think we really need to go back to the common sense basis of our rent control system, not try to undermine or upend it, and come up with and institute a plan that actually makes sense. All tenants should be treated equally, and to try to divide people in this way is I think it's very offensive and very destabilizing. So I'm very opposed to the alternative that was proposed. It may have been well-meaning, I don't know, but it's a really bad idea. And I very much support what the staff is recommending. Thank you.
Ms. Hilton. Thank you very much. Mr. Ho, do we have anyone else in the queue?
Yes, we have 3 members left waiting their turns to speak. Mr. Michael Soloff, a request from an attendee named Teresa Marasco, and Denise McGranahan.
Okay, then we'll go in that order. Mr. Soloff, you have 3 minutes.
Mr. Soloff, you have been unmuted. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Chairperson Duran and Commissioners. Michael Soloff, among other things, co-chair of Santa Monicans for Renters' Rights. I want to start by acknowledging what I think is the good part of what Council members Negrete and Delatorre's proposal does, and that is it acknowledges the fact that we have so many rent-burdened and severely rent-burdened low-income tenants in the city of Santa Monica who, as Commissioner Leslie put it the other night at City Council, simply need help. And that's an important thing. Unfortunately, what was brought forward is not the right solution to that problem and should be rejected. And that's for 3 reasons. The first is that we're talking about dealing with something that is so fundamental to 27,000 plus households in the city of Santa Monica. We cannot take the risk that something that has not been fully thought through and vetted has all sorts of unintended consequences, which could include that if it gets struck down through the legal risks that Ms. Regan pointed out, would mean that no tenant in a rent-controlled unit in the city of Santa Monica would get any relief from the upcoming 6% rent increase. I'm a lawyer. I understand the issues of risk, and when you have something this fundamental, it should just not be put at risk. Second, even if there wasn't any risk, this is just simply not the right tool. Rent control is not only for low-income people. One of the main purposes of rent control is that if you can afford to move into an apartment, then you should be able to afford, absent dramatic life circumstances, to remain in that apartment. And that has been fundamental to the character of this city, why we've had people who've been able to make their homes in the city in rental units and be vibrant parts of this city, whether they're serving on the rent control board, the city council, in every other way. That is absolutely fundamental to protect the middle class. Nobody wants to see us be a dumbbell where we only have the wealthy and only the low income. We want everybody here in Santa Monica, and rent control is absolutely essential to that. Those folks need relief from the 6% rent increase as well. There's just no question about that. So it's not the right way to do it. And the third is it wouldn't be enough help anyway, because we have so many severely rent burdened, lower income renters. Even if they had a 0% increase for the next 4 years.
I'm sorry, Mr. Soloff, that's your time.
Without objection, Soloff, you could finish your thought.
Mr. Soloff, you have been unmuted. Please continue.
Thank you. So even at a 0% increase, they still need the help. The only solution is real resources to expand rent subsidy. That's what the transfer tax ballot initiative would do, and that's what should be supported to address that issue. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Soloff. Secretary Ho, you mentioned there was a Teresa, and I missed her last name. That's who I had next in my queue.
Yes, Teresa Marasco. However, she has not accepted her invitation to interact, so she is not prepared. We do have Denise McGranahan available.
Okay, then we'll hear from Ms. McGranahan next.
Ms. McGranahan, you will have 3 minutes to address the board. You have been unmuted. Please go ahead.
Great. Good evening. I am a senior attorney at LAFLA, where I've worked since 1996. Our office is funded by the city, the Santa Monica office, and we help people up to 80% of area median income, which means we represent people with a range of income from extremely low to low. And although most of our clients are extremely low, we do have clients, of course, who are more middle income. And Councilmember Negrette's proposal, while good intention, would potentially uproot the basic principles underlying the rent control law that have been in place since 1979 and that have been tried and tested in numerous courts and determined to be constitutional, providing a fair return to landlords throughout the city. The proposed revisions to the GA ballot measure could create a divided city for 4 years. Tenants who pay at or under the 50th percentile of rent-controlled rents would get no increase, and those over 50% would pay 6%, not to exceed $140. This line is arbitrary and has nothing to do with the tenant's ability to pay the MAR, whether below or at market. There is no direct relationship between the amount of rent and the tenant's burden. This formula undermines the concept of fair return to all landlords and fairness to all tenants. As stated in the staff report, lowering the cap below 3% risks denying a fair and reasonable return to some of the Santa Monica's landlords who own smaller properties with longer-term tenants. This proposal, if put on the ballot and if passed, could be the beginning of the end of rent control, a policy that is extremely important to the clients we serve at LAFLA, and preserving a diverse and stable community. Without rent control, rents will skyrocket, and this community will be like Laguna Beach or Beverly Hills by the sea. It is true that there are rent control tenants who are severely rent burdened who would be helped by this measure, but not everyone paying rent at or below the 50th percentile is low income. Conversely, there are many families who are not long-term residents who moved into Santa Monica qualifying for market rent units and thereafter became severely rent burdened for one reason or another, including loss of employment or divorce, and then the pandemic hit. And so we have had many clients who would not previously have been able to, would not previously have been our clients, who found themselves in the situation of not being able to afford the market rent they qualified for. And those people are our clients now as well. And luckily, many of them were assisted by the city, the county, the state, receiving up to 18 months of rent relief. But some of them are still struggling, a number of them. After the rent relief program stopped on March 31st, we began seeing lots of 3-day notices. People have not financially recovered from the pandemic. Some of those tenants are more recent renters with families, people of color, and they can't pay their rent. We referred so many people to the city, on the average 3 to 5 people a week since April 1st. And these people, their rents are between $1,000 and $4,000.
I'm sorry, Ms. McGranahan, that's your time.
Without objection, Ms. McGranahan can finish her thought.
Ms. McGranahan, you've been unmuted. Please continue.
Thank you. I wanted to also mention that the Section 8 tenants will also incur an increase because any amount over the payment standard is incurred by the tenant, and that means that's because the housing authority follows the GA when it increases rent. So the extremely low income tenants will also end up experiencing this increase. And finally, I just want to say that this will just put a bigger target on the backs of the low income, the extremely low rent paying tenants. We already see a ton of tenant harassment when people are paying low rent, but now there's going to be even a greater incentive to evict people who are paying low rent. So I encourage the board to go with its original proposal, follow the staff report, and reject council members' possibly well-intentioned amendment, but one that is just nonsensical. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. McGranahan. Secretary Ho, are there any other speakers in queue?
Yes, we have Teresa Moresco.
Okay. Ms. Moresco, you're ready. You have 3 minutes.
Ms. Moresco, if you would like to turn on your video camera, now is the time to do so. You'll have 3 minutes to address the board. Please go ahead.
Let's turn on my camera. Good evening, rent control commissioners. I don't want to take too much of the time this evening, as several people have already stated what I was going to state. I truly concur with Attorney Denise McGranahan that there are many, many people who were not considered in either of the ballot measures or speaking on, I think it was item 11A, and are not considering that there are a lot of tenants who are already paying more than 50% of their income in rent, who are already above the median MAR. For instance, someone in a 2-bedroom rent-controlled unit who's paying over $2,000 a month, and people who are on Section 8 who are paying more than 40% of their income in rent in a rent-controlled unit. And these are things that I don't think have been taken into consideration. I believe that there are a lot more people who will be really severely rent burdened and probably forced to move from the city of Santa Monica as a result of this 6% increase. I still feel that it should be lower than 3%, but 3% is good. I also wanted to state that POD is a great program, but it's only for people who are 62 and over. There are people on fixed incomes who are disabled who are only getting, just less than $1,000 a month that wouldn't be, they wouldn't be eligible for POD funds. So I just don't know how much money would be available to rescue these people, especially if they're incurring back rent, as Vice Chairperson Foster spoke about earlier in the meeting. If people would be hit with back rent, they would probably be evicted or have to move, agree to move. That is all I have to say, and thank you so much for all your hard work. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Ms. Marowska. Secretary Ho, are there any other speakers in queue?
No, that was our final speaker request.
Okay, then we'll close the public comment section and we'll move to discussion. Any commissioners like to discuss?
Well, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I can't, it kind of froze on me, so I don't know if anybody raised their hand. So I heard Vice Chair Foster. Go ahead.
Oh, sure. I'll start. Thank you, Chair. I went on a bit of a rant a couple of weeks ago at our other meeting, and I might go on one again. I'm very concerned that what I saw at council the other night until 4 o'clock in the morning was, I have no doubt that that Councilmember Negrete and De La Torre and Brock, whom I heard speak on the issue, I have no doubt that they love this city, that they are well-intentioned, but I do have concerns about their level of complete understanding of rent control and what it is and the role that it plays in our city. Even if some of them are renters or landlords, the comments I heard were probably, again, well-intentioned, maybe given to them by other parties, but they were inaccurate. And, we are here to offer our help, our expertise. We have a 25-member staff that does nothing but rent control. We have a 5-member board that does nothing but rent control. And they were right. Somebody said it during that meeting. They're like, oh, well, that's all they do. Exactly. That's all we do. And we know it inside and out. And I just know that council members of all kinds and all types who are on the board or on the council today were elected to take care of this whole city. They were elected on issues I heard during the campaign, like homelessness, crime, traffic, development. Those are the issues I heard people talking about. What I don't think the intention was to have landlords, specifically very educated activist landlords, which that's fine, but be the only voice that provided a policy idea with their interpretation of data. In some cases, alternative facts. And I think that council members need to work with us, maybe take the time this weekend to watch this meeting and understand the data. I will set aside my entire week, talk to any council member who wants to better understand this issue, because I don't want the only ballot measure that goes before the people to be one that is so flawed and potentially completely illegal to do that it is then undone, and every single tenant in this city gets a full 6% increase as a result of a flawed measure being offered to them that sounds good for some, sounds completely awful for others, but that is not legal. And a wholesale change to rent control has to be a community-wide discussion with public input and stakeholder input, that it consists of more than just the progressive landlords of Santa Monica, Action Apartment Association, and AGLA. A room full of people that for the last week manipulated data to sound a certain way to, I think, innocent council members who need more advice and more expertise and more data. But I listened to that meeting, and the direction was given that everybody pinky swore that this was going to be either 6% going to 3%, or this 0% and 6% splitting the city in half, unequal application of rent. Like, literally, those are the only two choices. But I am standing by the analysis of staff, general counsel, years of experience of dealing with these issues, years of experience of studying the numbers in depth as to what the returns are in this city. And the fact that over the I'm getting wild proposals on the fly again today that are wildly different from either of the things that are before us on this agenda tonight. I understand people have ideas. They need to be properly processed. When we pass the smallest regulation, when council passes the smallest ordinance, it goes through a presentation, staff direction, a first reading, a second reading, for the smallest little change. This is a wholesale change to the fabric of our community. The public has not had a chance to weigh in. 5 or 6 days isn't enough. We can come back and revisit rent control policy after a robust public discussion. But if 4 people vote for this alternative measure against professional advice, against expert advice next week, the messaging will be way too easy. Landlords wrote this measure for unsuspecting council members who meant well. But instead of doing well, it will decimate lives. If a single father with 2 kids is paying $25.10 in a 2-bedroom apartment, he will get a $140 increase this year, and don't kid yourself, a $140 increase again the year after that. Because we're already in the calculation period of the next GA. And has inflation stopped? I don't think so. But his neighbor who's paying $24.50 will get 0 increase. Same apartment, same building, same footprint, a completely unequal and separate set of rules on a dividing line that was simply chosen by landlords. And every landlord who worked on this policy, who has a building that has 50% or 2/3 or 3/4 of their tenants paying market rates, stands to make a fortune off of 6% rather than 3%. That is an easily calculated fact, because the entire world can see our MAR database and the addresses of landlords who own buildings. And I got letters today from angry, confused landlords who said, I didn't go to those meetings, and I don't know what's going on, and I don't know who made this proposal on my behalf. I don't want this. This isn't fair to me. This isn't fair to my tenants even. So I implore council to meet with us, any of us who they have time to meet with, for a private and in-depth conversation about rent control in this city, because they need to have all of the information before they make such a critical decision. And come September 1st, the 70% of this town, a lot of whom are registered to vote, will become aware of what happened to them. And we're trying to help you now. If we don't do the standard, legally thought out, publicly considered percent to 3%, if we do anything other than that, we are asking for trouble in court, trouble for our tenants, and 6% for everyone when that gets overturned in court. So I, for one, will be recommending the publicly debated for months notion that council was already considering without any amendments that weren't at least just procedural in nature, that takes us from 6% to 3% with the appropriate cap. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair Foster. Any other commissioners like to speak on the subject? All right, Commissioner Trosas, go ahead.
Hi, thank you, Chair Duran. I mean, I think what I'm going to say comes as no surprise, but just on a personal level, I want to thank our staff, the 25 of you who work day in and day out on these issues, know the intricacies of the law, and I want to thank our general counsel for standing up for the legal and the just and the right thing for our community. I also want to say that, you know, there are some things like best practices on making policy, and the reason that we've all been elected, and I do want to make that clear, elected independently, is to listen to the will of our constituents, and that includes robust public engagement. I take that very seriously as someone who's been elected to this office, and anyone who knows me knows I will engage, sit down, meet with anyone. And I offered that to the council, and instead of engaging in any sort of discussion on the ballot initiatives that we put forward to them, there was a wholesale 2 a.m, what I believe to be a material change and a non-noticed item placed on an agenda in a specific way such that there would be an under-the-radar decision made without public input. And we all know that that doesn't lead to good policy. So whatever the reason for that was, we won't know. But I will say that there is no way that I would accept anything that means tests our renters, and there's no way that I would accept anything that hasn't gone through a duly noticed, Brown-acted public meeting multiple times over, which is what we did when we presented our ballot initiatives, and also presented those initiatives at multiple different meetings in the community to talk to community members and get their input as well. And that's what I think a good public servant does. They listen to their constituents and they engage with the public. And I do want to say that the voters of Santa Monica did create the Rent Control Board in 1979 to be completely independent of the city council. For those of you who don't know, we are not a city agency. We are a completely self-sufficient agency with our own executive director, our own general counsel, are completely self-funded. And of course, the 5 of us are independently elected. And the power of the Rent Control Charter vests with this body. Never in my time have I seen anything more than council accepting a recommendation of the rent board and moving that forward. But yet we have a council who thinks that that it is appropriate to make significant changes to an independently elected body's recommendations. So that's disappointing. And I think that I'm going to continue and again say that in the best interest of our community, in looking at what we've
done in similarly situated jurisdictions, I'm going to support the 3% cap because not only does it apply equitably across the board, it also allows folks to have stability and plan for the future. It's not something that could be litigated, something that could be subject to a 4-year sunset, something that folks are unsure about or concerned about. And it allows folks at all income levels to be protected. And the counter proposal, in fact, allows landlords at the highest earning end of the spectrum to make even more money. And so that is not exactly what I'm here to do. Of course, I want to protect our mom and pop landlords. That's why I'm going to heavily advocate for rent subsidies for our folks and make sure that everyone across all, ranges of our constituency are protected. And I do want to, again, acknowledge, like I said at the last meeting, that over $40 million of rent relief and 100% of back rent for those who applied was paid to our landlords in this community pursuant to an agreement that was reached in Sacramento with our governor and our legislature. So I know that folks feel that landlords haven't been, paid, but in fact, I can assure you that they have. And so I would just call on City Council to respect the recommendation of this expert body. And I would also just say that the folks that we have on the staff who do this day in and day out are literal experts that are consulted by every jurisdiction across the state, by folks out of state. We are looked to as the preeminent rent control jurisdiction and have advised many of the other jurisdictions in the state on how to set up their rent control law. I know that this is getting personal and it's political, not personal, but to disrespect, it's not about me, but to disrespect our staff in the way that I saw was really disheartening. And I don't think that that's the way we should treat folks who are literally working as public servants every day. So again, I believe that we should preserve the spirit of our rent control law. We should provide the ability to build wealth and build savings and have money tucked away for emergencies. And I believe that a 6% adjustment is not acceptable, and we need to cap it at 3%, and that's what I will be voting for tonight.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Trosis. Commissioner Leslie, do you have any comments at this time, or should I go ahead?
Go ahead. I'll bring up the rear if I need be.
Of course. Okay, then what I would like to focus on is a couple of points. Commissioner Trosis, Vice Chair Foster mentioned how well vetted the recommendation was that we presented to the City Council. And there were numerous meetings that we had, numerous debates, public comment, public reaching out into the community to ask their opinions. We went back and forth on several meetings before we came to the conclusion that we came to and presented to the council. So I don't question what we presented to council. So I want to focus the rest of my comments on what was proposed by Council Member Negretti, and I believe it was dilatory, but I'm not quite sure on that. But what I want to say before that is I am sure, I know them both, and I deeply believe that they were both well-intentioned. I think, though, that the proposed changes that they presented causes big issues of concern. For me, being a lawyer, I'm always thinking about, when I do this job, what's going to pass constitutional muster, what's going to get us into a lawsuit, what's not. I can't turn that off. And what was proposed by the alternate proposal, I'll call it, raised an issue that our staff report mentions, and I think it bears repeating, that what was suggested was not reasonably calculated to eliminate excessive rents and promise landlords with a fair return on their property. And because it doesn't meet constitutional muster, it's just going to open us up, the city up, to lawsuits. And I think they're going to be meritorious claims. That's my personal opinion. And when that happens, and if it is struck down, then we're left with where we are today. A city that's in dire need of help. The 6% increase is going to be too much for too many people to handle. The second point I want to make is it separates it separates those who are below the MAR and those who are above. And in doing so, it discriminates, I believe. And that's something the city can't do, right? It's selecting people who are below the MAR, and it's saying we're not going to raise your rent for 4 years, but that's discriminatory to the people that are above and still may be struggling. It also discriminates against landlords who, at the beginning of this item, I asked Ms. Regan to discuss the effect it would have on the mom and pop landlords, let's call them. It'll be discriminatory to them as well. And it raises equal protection questions. And for all these reasons, I don't think that it was well thought out, and I don't think that it should be what's put forward. For those reasons, I really do believe that the proposal that we put forward was one that was well thought out and would pass constitutional muster. And that is what, when it gets time to voting tonight, if we do come to a vote, I would be supporting moving forward. Any other comments by any other commissioners? If not, I'll entertain a motion if that's what is appropriate. Vice Chair Foster.
I'll defer to Commissioner Leslie first, but if she wants to comment. But if not, yeah, I've got some more thoughts.
Okay. Commissioner Leslie, go ahead if you would like.
Wait, you're muted. Erica, we can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. I was just going to say, as we were talking, I want to thank Councilmember Brock, and I want to thank Member Negrete and De La Torre for after 3 hours of debate, for agreeing to slow down for a second, and instead of taking a vote that night, come back to us and come back to the community and even get, a little bit of input. I mean, I've done nothing else for the last 48 hours since that meeting than work on this, think about this, reach out to folks, talk with people, hour after hour after hour, forgoing my day job and everything to try to get help people understand this issue. But that's the problem. Working on the fly, working on quickie compromise deals or horse trading or used car selling, deal making. This is far too big of an issue to be handled that quickly, or to toss ideas around. Let's just simply do what other cities do, or let's try this, or let's try that, all in just a few days, none of it publicly noticed, none of it studied by their own staff even, or ours. But what we are bringing to bear is another chance to get this right. And there's time to get this right. Rent control can be studied. We can talk about the merits of it, the details of it, the pluses and minuses, the pros and cons, and get the data, the real data, and compare and contrast it in front of our constituents, all of us, over the next couple of years. There's another ballot cycle in 2024. But to make wholesale change to it, I feel is just, while it may have been well-intentioned, I think we've done a pretty thorough job the last couple of days of demonstrating why it won't work and why it's extremely problematic. And even if they acknowledge that, not to then attempt to just throw out some other scenario or some next scenario, and most of which are coming from landlords. I'm not saying they're not stakeholders. Of course they're stakeholders. Of course they are. But so are tenants. So is the public. So are the firefighters and hotel workers and teachers who live in these apartments who are above that 50% median mark. They didn't get any say in this and wouldn't for 4 years under this proposal, if it even held up in court, which I doubt it would. So what I'm saying is the only thing that's agendized this week are these two choices: go from 6 to 3% or do this other thing. I want to thank the council members for slowing down and having these conversations. I look forward to the conversations we're going to have over the next few days. I really do, because that's what public service is about. They have things to teach me, and I have things to teach them. It's an exchange of ideas and an exchange of knowledge and expertise. But I know these people; they're good people. They love this city, and I watched what they ran on, and it wasn't this. It wasn't to carry just simply the perspective of landlords forward wholesale to completely change rent control at the end of the night. I think if people want to be actual heroes to the citizens of this city in this crisis, it'll be through this reasoned, court-tested, reasonable and fair application of the law, which is a reduction in the general cap to 3%. And by the way, I will say it again. I've written this in multiple letters to council. We've written it in op-eds. We put it on Facebook and Nextdoor and everywhere we can be heard. The average general adjustment for the last 23 years averages out to 1.9%. That means some years it was 1%, some years it was 3%, but it tracked the CPI. That's the point. Having a flat one or other, just because some other cities have tried other things, ours works really well because it does. In a big year, it's higher. In a low year, it's lower. It's been this way for 23 years and court tested because it works. And if we're going to examine any changes to it, it's got to be studied and studied and studied again. Measure 3 times before you cut once, council. Thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Leslie, go right ahead.
So, as I've talked to people in the community, and most people don't understand what's going on. And that's the reason why I asked the questions that I did, so that not only myself, but also the community members can make 100% sure that they understood what took place. Because to the naked eye, or somebody, that really doesn't understand it, they thought that the proposal was a good thing, not understanding the ramifications that could take place if this was enacted. I think that once we have council members that don't truly understand what rent control fully means, or, the rent control law, that these type of things will happen. It doesn't mean they're bad people, it just means their hearts were in the right place, but with the wrong sentiment. As Councilman Negretti said, think outside the box. Thinking outside the box with public policy can be detrimental to our entire community. I understand, trying to be innovative. Innovation creates good things in business, but this is not necessarily a business move. This is not anyone's personal business model to be just taken, and just say, well, we'll just try this. We can't do that. We have too many people depending on us, too many people that are looking to us to help them out. For us to treat the city like our own personal business, to throw something upside the wall and see what sticks. You have to be very careful about what we do, because it affects the livelihood and the lives of so many people here in the city. It's like I've been saying repeatedly, that are community members, because we have a community here. Our community members need help. And it's our job to help them, including the landlords that don't really understand that if even as a business model and a businesswoman as Ms. Negretti is, that if people don't have disposable income, they can't frequent your business. You can't have patrons if they have no money to spend. So we really have to take this and all these things into account and bundle them up and do what's best for everybody. Those are my closing remarks.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Leslie.
I'm prepared to make a motion.
Okay, Commissioner Trosis.
I move that we advance to the City Council our original proposal of a 3% to place on the November ballot, a 3% general adjustment increase, and then of course with the kind of prorated 22-23 increase of 6% from September to March and 0% from March to August 31st, with the then 3% proceeding every year thereafter on September 1st, 2023. And hope that this will be, well, no editorial, that's the motion.
Just brief, I think you meant to say maximum of 3%.
Maximum, I did, yep.
You said 3% for the following years. It
Sorry,
wouldn't necessarily be whatever the 75% of CPI is.
Depending on the calculation of the 75% of CPI, but looking at our CPI, it doesn't look promising. Take that editorial out.
Can I ask a clarifying question, Commissioner?
Sure.
Is your motion essentially, well, not essentially, is your motion staff's recommendation?
Correct, yes. Sorry, move staff's recommendation forward to City Council.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, there's a first, is there a second?
Yes, second.
Okay, been a first and a second, then we will take a roll call vote. Secretary Ho?
Yes, Commissioner Leslie.
Yes, can I say one thing?
Well,
Is it an amendment to the motion?
Yes, is it an amendment to the motion?
I kind of, sort of, I guess, that they have to necessarily make sure that they understand the why of why we're, going forward with this motion. That's my, I guess, my friendly amendment is that they understand the why.
That's a fair question. Can staff tell us what kind of report they'll be sending over?
They'll get our staff report. I don't know what or if city staff will prepare a separate report.
And Ms. Regan, will you be at the meeting to present that report?
I'll be there to answer questions. City staff is going to present there.
Great. Well, yeah. I put forward staff's recommendation with the request that we work with the city attorney and city manager to ensure that there is a robust presentation to the council, as well as a following of the Brown Act to ensure that we only consider properly agendized proposals.
Second. As amended.
Well, can I suggest? Let me come on camera so you guys aren't just looking.
Yeah, you don't like it because I'm editorializing.
Yeah, my suggestion would be because what you're recommending is what to place on the ballot. So I think I would vote on that motion, and then as an aside, I will convey those sentiments to city staff and the council.
Great. So I move that we put forward staff's recommendation to place the 3% cap on the ballot.
Second.
Okay, and that was a second. Very good. Can we have a roll call vote, Ms. Secretary Ho?
Yes, Commissioner Trosis.
Yes.
Commissioner Leslie.
Yes.
Vice Chair Foster.
Yes.
Chair Duran.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Mr. Chair.
Yes. Go ahead.
I wanted to thank the public coming to an emergency, barely 24-hour scheduled notice meeting. I want to thank Ms. Condon for coming to us from the Eastern time zone. on her vacation to come back and be present and available for this meeting and helping staff prepare. I want to thank Ms. Regan for staying up until 5 o'clock in the morning the other night to answer council's questions, because they had a lot of questions, and it was great that you were there serving in your job and serving the public the way you did. And I want to thank my fellow commissioners for dropping everything in their lives, our children, our jobs, everything to come to an emergency meeting to help the public understand what's going on. Yes, thank you, Tracy, for being with us, and for all you do. Tracy and Elton, thank you. The renters of Santa Monica should know your names and your faces, and thank you to everyone who called in, all the advocates, the tenants, the landlords, the tenant organizations, the housing commissioners, all the people I heard tonight. Thank you so much. This is so important. I hope everybody realizes how important this is.
Very well said. Okay.
I think Ms. Connon wanted to say something, it looks like.
Oh, did
Yes.
you?
Yes,
Go
I
ahead.
do. Thank you. I just wanted to let everybody know, I want to thank the public for coming this evening and speaking with us on very short notice. That was very helpful. And to the commissioners for your careful and thoughtful analysis of this, and to Ms. Regan for her thorough analysis in a very short time. I want to thank all of you. And I also want to let you know that the City Council has changed their meeting date. It will be Wednesday, August 3rd at 6 p.m. And it will be a completely virtual meeting to ensure that all members of the council can participate, and the public will be able to participate. Well, the public will be able to certainly listen, and I'm not sure whether there will be another opportunity for public comment or not. I think we will learn that. But so next Wednesday, August 3rd at 6 p.m. Thank you.
Sorry, quick question. When you say the meeting's virtual, Ms. Condon, do you mean that the council members are not going to the City Hall?
That's correct, because that's correct. They will not all be in Santa Monica because this was an unscheduled meeting. And so it will be held virtually so that all of them may attend.
Okay. I would really implore us to be able to give public comment at that meeting if that's possible.
Very well said. Okay. Moving on then to item 16, adjournment. Before we do that, our next Rent Control Board meeting will be August 11th, 2022 at 7 p.m. And it will be determined whether it'll be via teleconference or in person in the council chambers. So I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move. So moved.
Okay, I heard Commissioner Leslie, motion to adjourn, Vice Chair Foster, seconded. Do we have a roll call vote?
Yes, Commissioner Leslie.
Yes.
Commissioner Torosis.
Yes.
Vice Chair Foster.
Yes.
Chair Duran.
Yes. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night, everyone.